Your Excellencies, Your Excellencies, Chair of the African Union, President Robert Mugabe, heads of states and governments from across the great continent, African Union Chairperson, Her Excellency Dr. Lamini Zuma, the host of this event, First Ladies, assembled ministers, dignitaries, supporters, friends, good afternoon and a warm welcome to this luncheon to mark the launch of the negotiations for the Continental Free Trade Area. Now, my name is Mark Edo, and I'm a proud Nigerian and a proud African. It's great to see my own president here. I'm honored and I'm humbled and I'm excited to guide this wonderful event today. Now, the single most important objective of the African Union is in its name: union, unity, teamwork, togetherness, integration. And you, our visionary leaders, have today agreed to come together to find a path towards a common market for Africa. It will be called the Continental Free Trade Area, or CFTA, and I believe it will transform Africa. No one is under any illusion that the road to this market will be an easy one. The negotiations will at times be tough. We won't always see eye to eye. But if we all set our compasses in the right direction, that we reach for what unites us and not what divides us, I believe we can get there. I know that many of you in the room agree with me. Now, the goal is 2017, and you might see to my left here a very big clock. The clock is already set on day one. Your Excellencies, we have 931 days to change Africa's history. But just imagine what could be. A businessman in Ghana, let's call our ambitious brother Kofi. If Kofi, imagine, could connect to distant markets thousands of miles away in East Africa, just imagine if he could connect to 3 or 4 or 54 markets if they were open to Kofi, and businesses like his across the continent. But the things that disconnect our markets aren't really geographic. It's the different rules, the different regulations, and the practices of our disparate markets. We need a common way of doing things. And the CFTA is not just about the exchange of goods and services. It's about the exchange of ideas, African ideas. Opening our borders to each other will open ourselves up to the sharing of those ideas, technologies, skills, and best practices. We'll better be able to tackle common challenges together. And the world is by no means waiting for us to get our act together. Common markets are appearing all across the globe. They're pushing ahead with their own free trade agreements. As Her Excellency, the AUC Trade Commissioner, said in today's Financial Times of London, our real strength lies in our unity. Africa must trade with Africa. Her Excellency, the Chairperson, and the entire African Union Commission have put the CFTA at the center of Agenda 2063. They are committed to working as hard as they can to make the CFTA a reality, but they can't do it alone. They need, in order to create one market that will lift millions of Africans, they need the will and they need the strength of great leaders like you behind them. We have to do now what will strengthen Africa for our children in the future. The CFTA, after all, is about people, and the negotiations are an important first step in making Africa more African. Thank you. Now, thank you. Now, it's my great pleasure to turn to a panel discussion. This is an unusual thing for us to do, but I think it's wonderful because this gives us the opportunity to drill down on what really the CFTA means and what it will mean for Africa, the negotiations, and just how important and historic this moment is. So it's my great pleasure now to invite to join me on stage for that panel discussion on the CFTA, His Excellency, the President of the High-Level African Trade Committee, President of Senegal, Macky Sall. Please join me on the stage, sir. I want to read a quote. There's no reason why it's easier for us to trade with Asia, Europe, and the Americas, rather than with fellow Africans. I so much wish that I had written that, but I didn't. It was written by a champion for African integration, who I'll now call to the podium, His Excellency, the President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me on stage. Give him a round of applause. Now, another passionate advocate for Pan-Africanism I will also call His Excellency, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union, Mr. Erastus Mwencha. Mr. Mwencha, please join us. And give them a hearty round of applause, please. Next, His Excellency, please join us, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Dr. Carlos Lopez, ladies and gentlemen. And last but certainly not least, Her Excellency Mrs. Fatima Haram Asil, the Commissioner for Trade and Industry, African Union Commission.
Yeah? Okay. Yes. Okay. Lady and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it's a pleasure to sit on a panel here. Let's start. I think I'd like to ask the same question to begin with, to at least to the presidents, to all of you really. And it's the most straightforward of questions. And I think I'd like to begin with His Excellency, the President of Senegal, Macky Sall. And the question is a simple one. The launch of the CFTA negotiations is clearly an historic moment for Africa, but just how significant is it as the leader of one of the countries central to the CFTA's success?
Je vous remercie. Je voudrais dire d'abord tout le plaisir que j'ai à participer à ce débat d'une extrême importance pour notre continent, au moment où nous parlons de la zone de libre-échange continentale. Il faut d'abord rappeler que ce projet de zone de libre-échange continentale a été lancé grâce à la volonté des chefs d'État et de gouvernement. Il faut se rappeler du sommet d'Abuja qui avait déjà en 2012, en janvier 2012, préconisé la mise en place de cette zone de libre-échange au niveau continental. C'est un bon sens que l'Afrique, dans sa globalité et dans son entièreté, puisse renforcer le commerce intra-africain. L'Afrique négocie en ce moment avec différentes régions du monde. Vous avez l'Union européenne, vous avez nos partenariats différents avec les États-Unis, avec la Chine, bref. Avant de renforcer ces partenariats et ces accords de libre-échange, puisque nous négocions séparément avec chacune de ces entités, au niveau continental, au niveau global, nous devons quand même faire de l'Afrique une seule et même zone, avec à l'arrivée une zone douanière commune, un tarif extérieur commun, afin de développer le commerce intra-africain qui aujourd'hui se situe autour de 12%, alors que dans l'Union européenne, ils sont à plus de 60% en échange et en commerce entre pays membres. Donc, c'est tous les pays africains et tous les chefs d'État sont d'accord sur l'objectif. Il s'agit maintenant d'avancer à pas de géant pour que cela devienne une réalité. Voilà ce que je voudrais dire. Et nous sommes interpellés, nous avons la chance aujourd'hui de jouer ces rôles. Je pense que nos gouvernements la commission, que je félicite au passage pour l'important travail qui est fait, ainsi que Madame la commissaire chargée du commerce, ont fait un excellent travail que les chefs d'État doivent soutenir et consolider. Je vous remercie.
And she does. A round of applause. Excellent. I'm going to go from one president to the other. I'm going to go from west to east. I called you a passionate advocate for integration, and your words are they're so poetic. I love it when you talk about matters like this. But the figures that His Excellency just said are sobering. 12% intra-African trade compared to 60% on the continent that we love. I know you're a passionate individual. How important is the CFTA in changing those figures?
One common African market. I think I just want to go back to a lot of the issues that we've even discussed at our current summit. We're talking about migration. We're talking about poverty. Yet today, 6 out of the 10 fastest growing economies are on the African continent.
They're right here.
Right here on the African continent. The youngest population in the globe is right here on the African continent, with growing aspirations, huge capacity to grow. But our focus is on trade, not with the potentiality of people that we have, but our focus is exporting our raw materials, is exporting everything that God has given us on this continent into Europe, into Asia, into the Americas. Jobs are created there, and our children are running.
They go away.
They're going out there in search of those jobs. And all of this because of artificial boundaries that said that I am a Kenyan and I am different from the person who is across, who is a Ugandan. We are two separate countries. Could you imagine the potentiality of that young population, the potentiality of that huge and massive young market, if only we could get rid of these artificial borders, allow ourselves to develop this common market, allow an African market of 1 billion people. Imagine how many jobs we would be able to create. Imagine what wealth and prosperity we would be able to bring to our young people. We have seen it because a lot of the problems are largely driven by artificial fears. That if I were to open my market, the neighboring economy, South Africa, for example, is the largest economy. It'll take over and, run everything. But I can assure you that everybody stands to benefit, big economies and small economies. We in the East African region have seen, since we established our own common market, trade between us has actually grown. I think in the year 2000, trade within the region was at about 1.5 billion. In 2010, that figure was 3.5 billion. And each economy is growing. Uganda's exports to Kenya are growing. Kenya's exports to Uganda are growing. And vice versa. We just need to remove these artificial boundaries that were not created by us, but rather by our colonial masters, purely as they divided up the continent to take our resources to create jobs in Europe. We need to reverse that by removing those boundaries, by removing those blockages that we have put for ourselves, create the kind of market. And I have no doubt in my mind that if we dare to dream, we will create the Ashanti empires, the Timbuktu empires that existed before
the Benin
the
empires,
colonial.
my father's empire, the Benin empires of
There you
Nigeria.
go.
Don't forget that.
That existed and create hope and opportunity for our children.
That is a wonderful thought, a wonderful thought. Now, because we don't have a lot of time, I'm actually going to move quickly through. I called you a passionate advocate for Pan-Africanism, but it wasn't the first time I've heard it. Every time I hear your name, I hear Pan-African combined with it. And I saw that when His Excellency was speaking, you were nodding emphatically. The CFTA, what does it mean to integration in Africa?
Thank you very much. Let me start with the paradox that His Excellency President Macky Sall talked about. Charity begins at home. President Macky Sall is saying, we are keen and busy negotiating trade arrangements with others when actually we are not doing it with ourselves. And the paradox is also seen in numbers. These are the numbers. If you look at what we call tariffs that we charge products that come from outside Africa into Africa, the average is 8%. But the goods coming from Africa to Africa, we charge 13%. Which means, inherently we are saying we want to trade more with the outside
than we do with
without
ourselves.
Africa. Now this morning, when the president, the former president, the current president of ADB was saying farewell, he brought out another issue, and that is the non-tariff barriers. And I'm going to use that to illustrate the example that my president here is very much familiar about. The issue now in intra-African trade is not so much of the tariffs that I've just talked about, although they are there. It is the non-tariff barriers. There is an example of East Africa, which my president would perhaps give even more. It is so difficult to move across borders, as he has just said. Here's an example. Moving a container from Mombasa to Kigali a few years ago, a few months ago, used to take over 40 days. The president of East Africa met, as you just heard him say, and they then asked, why should a journey of about 1,500 kilometers or thereabout
Take 40 days.
take 40 days? It is the bureaucracy on the way. They directed the bureaucrats to look at that issue. And they came back. Today, that journey, His Excellency Mr. President will confirm, is just about 6-7 days. Imagine the cost that you save. If we now launch a continental free trade area, it means these are the issues that we should address, the tariffs and non-tariff barriers, in addition to benefiting from the demographic dividends that the Excellencies have just talked about.
Thank you very much, and you got a round of applause for that. A beautiful segue would be to His Excellency, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, Dr. Carlos Lopez. Now, ECA research is quite rigorous on this, on intra-African trade, and one of the things that you've shown is that industrialization really is the key to economic transformation in Africa. My question to you, sir, is how does the CFTA fit into those equations?
Well, first, let me say that we are competing for attention with India, because when you look into the world map, the two big areas that are not integrated in different trade agreements is Africa and India. Now, contrary to perceptions, despite the fact that India has slightly more population than Africa, the per capita of Africa is higher than India. The number of cell phones in Africa is higher than India. The internet penetration in Africa is higher than India. Disposable income in Africa is higher than India. And trade, as part of the composition of GDP, is higher in Africa than India. So it looks like in the picture, we are better than India. But there is a trick. And the trick is that they are growing at 7%, which is the minimum that we should be growing.
At the minimum.
Otherwise, they are going to move, we are going to be left behind. And we are going to be left behind under circumstances that are absolutely terrible for the future if we don't do something about it. And I'll explain very quickly why industrialization is so key. We are the latecomers on industrialization. Even in India, they are more advanced in industrialization than Africa. Despite our growth right now, over the last decade and a half, there is one statistic that is going down, and that is called manufacturing value addition.
Manufacturing value addition.
Which means the contribution of manufacturing to GDP in percentage terms is going down, and is going down in almost every single country in Africa, including the most industrialized ones, like the one where we are, South Africa. This is very worrisome. Not only are we latecomers, but instead of moving forward, we are moving backwards.
So how could a common market address that?
Well, because contrary to all other regions, we are coming to play the industrialization card when the regulatory frameworks have been established. Everybody else has industrialized when the conditions were better than the ones we are going to face. They had less regulations, they had less intellectual property regime constraints, they had more access to capital, they could more or less do whatever they wanted in terms of internal protectionism. And now we are facing a barrier of laws, dispositions internationally that will not allow us to do that. So how do we go around it? By creating an internal market. Because in that internal market, we create our own conditions. This is a negotiation between Africans. It's a 1 billion, a strong market. It's going to turn into 2 billion. We are importing 70% of the yogurt that we consume in Africa. Can't we do yogurt? Is it rocket science? So we have a real problem of not seizing opportunities because our markets are segmented, are fragmented, are not allowing us to move forward in an environment where the regulatory systems are so complex that not only are we latecomers, but we are facing a situation that we can solve by creating our internal market, and we are taking too long to do it.
And those solutions, in your experience, in your research, exist right here on the continent. They just need to be disseminated, spread across the continent, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I'm very convinced. And by the way, just to pick on President Macky Sall's 12% intra-Africa trade figure, it's a very good demonstration of what Africans can do. Because that figure masks three realities that are less known. The first is that we have regions that are quite ahead of this average because they have created the good conditions. Erastus Moencha was just mentioning, indirectly, East African community has created, through all this work on integration, almost 29% intra-Africa, intra-regional trade. That is the level of Southeast Asia. So the reason why this 12% comes to be so emphatically mentioned is because it is the average of the continent, but it is drawn back to the realities of some regions that are not doing anything about integration of trade. The second very important fact to mention is that we have a below-the-belly reality. Below-the-belly meaning we have huge transactions that are informal. They are not going through the customs. You know, I'm from Guinea-Bissau. In the official statistics of my country, there is no trade with Senegal. It is 0%.
So there's no trade between Guinea-Bissau
and
Senegal?
There is zero in the official statistics. But the reality is completely different. There's nothing that I will find in the market that is not coming from Dakar.
But it's informal.
That's informal. And then we have the above-the-head reality, which is we are not equipped, the countries are not equipped for sophisticated forms of integration that are taking place and also do not appear in the statistics. And that is the roaming services. Like, for instance, you have telephone operators that have 13 countries roaming, something that the Europeans have been discussing now for 10 years. We already have it in Africa.
Now, I'll interrupt you for a second and we'll come back. There were a lot of good points there. The next panelist I want to call on wakes up in the morning and thinks CFTA. At lunch, she thinks CFTA. In dinner, she's thinking CFTA. And just before she nods off at night, she's thinking CFTA. Exactly right. The Commissioner for Trade and Industry, it is your unique position, really, Mrs. Fatima Haram Asil, to coordinate the massive efforts to bring all stakeholders across the continent together to make the CFTA, at least let's start with the negotiations, successful and a reality. Now, please speak to me like an intelligent 12, as if I'm an intelligent 12-year-old. Who are the stakeholders and what are you asking of them?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mark, for this good question. I think that the CFTA is, first of all, is good for Africa and also good for the world. So that's very, very important because we're talking about 1 billion of market. So the demand is there. The raw material is in Africa, so we need to transform in this continent. We need to attract investment. So this is very important. Now, when we talk about the stakeholders, we're talking, first of all, about government. Government, we know we have the political will because the head of state and government are the one that decided to have the Continental Free Trade Area by 2017.
So it must be great to hear from two sitting presidents those words.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So the political will is there. So we're not questioning any political will. The negotiation will not be easy. As you know, our economies are different. You know, there are some rich resource countries. There are some landlocked countries, there are small island countries, but we know with your political will, we know with knowing the benefit of the Continental Free Trade Area, we will prevail and we will surprise the world. So the Continental Free Trade Area will happen. The second thing is the private sector. The government is going to enable an environment for the private sector. So it's very important that we implicate the private sector. And again, our head of state and government thought about that. That's why, as part of the Continental Free Trade Area, as part of the architecture, we are supposed to create a business council to ensure that the private sector voices are heard. So it's very important that we engage the private sector from day one. It's not about negotiating and leaving the private sector behind. So it's very important we involve them. Now, when we talk about private sector, of course, we're talking about men and women of this continent. But when you look at the cross-border trades, 85% of them are women. So it's also very important that we include women. We talk about women empowerment, and therefore it's very important that the women voices are also heard. The other party is the civil society. It's important also the civil society advocates and speak to the ordinary citizen about
connect with the people.
To connect with the people and to connect of what our head of state are doing, understanding the, you know, something like the CFTA will address the youth unemployment. The President Uhuru Kenyatta spoke about it, transformation of this raw material in the continent. Now our partners, technical partner, financial partner, this is a huge market. Of course, we need the partner to help us to realize and move forward. This is a huge market, so it's going to be also very interesting for the partner to have a big market of 1 billion people, whereby any company can be anywhere in this continent and produce and ship. For Africa, it will be a win-win situation. For Africa, it will be technological transfer, transformation of raw material in this continent, so it's very important. Of course, technical partners, we need your help also on backing up with the analysis, ensuring that we speak the language of our people, of our continent. If there is a fear, we need to come with data and analysis and support all what we're saying. So political engagement requires strong statistics, strong analysis. So for us, Continental Free Trade Area is a flagship project under the leadership of the chairperson of the African Union, Dr. Lamini Zuma, and it's very, very important. Important in fact, when we talk about connecting Africa, when we talk, for example, about high-speed train, what does high-speed train do if we have to stop at every single border and spending 2 hours or 2 days waiting for visas? So it's very important that we speak about connecting Africa when we have a bigger market, when we facilitate our border, when we have movement of people, movement of talent, so that we don't have our people to die on the sea, to migrate to Europe to find opportunities.
That's wonderful. And you do make an important point, because sometimes we start thinking about economics, buying and selling, but integrating of Africa through trade it points to a lot of issues, core issues. We're talking about peace and security. Peace and security is much easier if people are happy and given the tools and the freedoms to forge their own futures. The young people that His Excellency spoke about. So can I say that the two of you are anointed champions of the CFTA? Can we call you champions today?
Yes.
Now, another champion of the CFTA is the President of Ghana. He's not here, but the Honorable Minister Hannah Teta, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Ghana, is here, and I believe she's in the audience. So I'll call on her to make an intervention, please. Please stand, please. We don't have any lights on her, do we? So, but we'll hear your dulcet tones.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Ghana supports completely the Continental Free Trade Area, but let me try and break it down from 10,000 feet to the ground. Why do we want a Continental Free Trade Area? We're here in South Africa. Let's say we have a young businesswoman here, let's call her Lerato, who has started her own personal products company. And she believes that she's going to be the next Body Shop. And she sources aloe from South Africa, shea butter from West Africa, cocoa butter from other parts of the continent. But if she's importing those things into South Africa, she's got to pay duty today. So it makes it expensive. And if she wants to travel to West Africa, she's got to get a visa, which makes it also time-consuming. And because we don't have common standards, by the time the product that she's using as a raw material is brought into South Africa and meets the requirements of the South African Bureau of Standards, and everything she's got to go through to be able to get that as an ingredient, that alone might be a cost that is far above her budget as a startup to be able to use those key ingredients to create these great products. We could use your example, Kofi, who wants to make the best shoes in the whole world and wants leather from Nigeria or wants leather from Ethiopia, but wants to be able to source these things at the lowest possible cost to have the most competitive product, so that at the end of the day, he's not made inefficient by the inefficiencies we have imposed with the 1,001 borders, with the tariffs, with the cost of transport, with the cost of acquisition of visas, and with everything else that makes our products more expensive than they ought to be. So for us, the Continental Free Trade Area is the vehicle by which we empower our young people to be able to create the vision that they want for themselves, to be aspirational, to be the next generation of entrepreneurs, and to create the wonderful things that we know Africa is capable of. We have some of the greatest music. We have some of the best fashion. We have some of the smartest clothes. We certainly have some of the most intelligent business people. After all, a number of billionaires are on this continent. All they need is the space to thrive. And this Continental Free Trade Area that we will first create by facilitating the trade in goods, then we will next build on by having common standards that we will facilitate through ensuring visa-free travel to other parts of our continent, and creating the opportunity for further investment in the infrastructure that helps us to connect, to compete. That is what will make the difference, and that is what will contribute to Africa's prosperity. Thank you, Mark, for the opportunity.
Honorable Minister Hannah Tete, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Ghana, thank you. And from your mouth to God's ears. Now, I'm going to call for one more intervention from the floor, please. Dr. Amani asked for Chair of COMESA Business Council. I think you're in the green jacket over there. Yes. Have they got you a microphone? They will. Just a brief intervention, madam.
Yes, very brief, but you know, I am the voice of the private sector here. All our honorable and your excellencies, the heads of states, is now launching the CFT, but we are going to implement it as private sector. So last week in Sharm el-Sheikh, we already, the heads of state signed the Tripartite Summit, which is the COMESA, East Africa Community, and the SADC, which was also great towards this step of CFT. And what we have as 3 pillars is the free trade area, free movement of people and goods, but also the second pillar is industrialization infrastructure. Because if we want to have trade, we need to have an African product, good quality, very competitive. So having said that, we need to empower our African private sector. Our African private sector is the small and medium enterprises. I'm not talking about the multinational companies. I am talking about our science and technology investment in empowering our small and medium enterprises. How we do value addition, as Carlos have said, to have a good product. How can we empower the youth, as His Excellency President of Kenya? And having said that, I would like to congratulate Your Excellency, because of the government procurement policy, 30% to SMEs, women, youth, and disabled. Because this very crucial step will empower our private sector. And our role as business organizations, and also as Chair for Human Resource Science and Technology of the African Union, ECOSOC, is to make sure that our scientists, our scientific research institutes are geared towards the value addition of our raw materials, towards empowering the youth, the innovation, the intellectual property, our African products. Because if we don't have a good, competitive African product that we trade with, so what are we going to say? Infrastructure is very important. It also depends on how we have our roads, our marines, our shipments. It's all how we invest as private sector to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mani Asfour, Chair of the COMESA Business Council. Your Excellency, I began with you. I'm going to end with the both of you. I saw you nodding emphatically. There's some interesting points that came up from those 2 interventions, one of them being a diversity of product and the access to youth. Just weigh in on what you heard there and any other final thoughts, Your Excellency.
Voilà, je pense que nous partageons le même langage avec le secteur privé africain, puisqu'il s'agit en fait de lutter farouchement contre les barrières non tarifaires. Et ces barrières se retrouvent au sein de nos États. D'abord, l'obstacle sur la libre circulation des personnes et des biens, et c'est une réalité en Afrique. Il est inconcevable qu'entre nos pays, même les détenteurs de passeports diplomatiques ont des difficultés parfois d'accès dans un pays tiers. A fortiori, nos hommes d'affaires, nos étudiants, nos populations. La CEDEAO a réglé ce problème. Au sein de ECOWAS, nous avons depuis plus de 10 ans maintenant un seul et même passeport. Nous avons depuis 1 an donné instruction pour que la carte nationale d'identité soit unique, avec bien sûr la référence du pays. Au sein de la CEDEAO, on n'a même pas besoin de passeport pour prendre l'avion, tant qu'on est dans l'espace des 15 pays qui constituent la CEDEAO. Je crois que là, ce sont des avancées et pourtant les économies ne sont pas les mêmes. Vous avez le Nigeria d'une part, vous avez le Cap-Vert, la Gambie, le Sénégal, bref, le Mali. On est nombreux, on est différents, mais il y a plus de peur dans la perception de l'ouverture que la réalité. Aujourd'hui, cette situation devrait couvrir l'ensemble du continent. Un Africain ne doit pas être bloqué en Afrique pour aller d'un pays A vers un pays B. Et ça, c'est dans nos possibilités. La deuxième barrière non tarifaire, c'est la corruption au sein de nos routes. Et vous avez, la dernière fois, j'ai reçu des hommes d'affaires maliens et sénégalais. Ils m'ont dit, Monsieur le Président, il y a une taxe PDG. Je dis, mais c'est quoi la taxe PDG? En fait, P comme police, il me dit, D comme douane et G comme gendarmerie. Donc, il faut, sur chaque niveau de passage, il faut payer une taxe, il faut un contrôle. Donc, PDG is a big problem for la libre circulation. Enfin, nous avons déjà, au niveau de l'Afrique centrale et de l'Ouest francophone, réussi la prouesse d'avoir un seul code de droit des affaires. Un seul droit des affaires, c'est l'OHADA. Ça aussi, ça facilite le commerce. Parce qu'il faut régler la question des contentieux, il faut régler la question de l'installation des hommes d'affaires dans les différentes régions. Et sur toutes ces questions, si nos régions, communautés économiques régionales travaillent ensemble sous le leadership de la Commission de l'Union africaine, je crois que très rapidement, nous pourrons faire des pas de géants. Et l'autre obstacle, enfin, pour terminer, ce sont les infrastructures. Il est clair que lorsqu'on ne peut pas passer d'une capitale A à une capitale B, sinon il faut prendre l'avion, passer en Europe pour revenir, et on parlera de commerce, de libre-échange, mais il n'y aura pas d'échange. Donc la question du PIDA sur les infrastructures revient en force. Les routes, les chemins de fer en Afrique doivent être une priorité pour nous, pour que notre commerce, justement, et les investissements soient une réalité, et c'est à notre portée. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You did talk about great strides, and you talked about moving from one part of the continent to the other, and that's what we'll do finally for this panel. I'm going to take us all the way from Senegal and West Africa, straight across the vast expanse, all the way to East Africa, to you, Your Excellency, for the final thoughts on that.
I think I just want to summarize.
Please do.
Summarize by saying CFTA means an end to poverty. CFTA means prosperity for our continent. CFTA means jobs for our young people who today struggle and are fleeing our own continent. CFTA means peace and security because we have gainfully engaged our population. CFTA means agriculture and booming agriculture. If we can take advantage of our different seasons, there is no reason why Mozambique could not feed the entire African continent, for example. CFTA means Africa being able to be self-reliant. CFTA means the African Union meeting to discuss what to do with our prosperity as opposed to what to do with the problems that we suffer. Thank you.
Anything I say is going to take away from that. Your Excellencies, that was wonderful. Mr. Mwencha, Mr. Lopez, Dr. Lopez, and Mrs. Fatima Harama Sil. Ladies and gentlemen, a very robust round of applause for a wonderful panel. Now, you're not free yet, because in order for us to really mark this moment, let me get my microphone, I'm losing it here, we have to officially hit the gavel. And for that, I'm going to call one of the most powerful champions of Africa, who is the president of the African Union. He is also the president of Zimbabwe. Please, would you please rise to welcome to this stage Robert Mugabe, ladies and gentlemen. Your gavel is here, Your Excellency. And I understand you like to hit it twice, so I'm here with your gavel. Now, as the President makes his way, the President of the African Union makes his way to the stage, I will also ask all other presidents and heads of delegations here to ready themselves to join us on the stage for an iconic photograph once this very important moment has passed. So, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the African Union, President Robert Mugabe, round of applause, please. Excellency, yes. Your gavel.
Just that.
And this is, yes, to announce the official opening of the negotiations.
Well, let me say a few words.
Please, as many as you like, Your Excellency, as many as you like.
I was actually surprised that I would be faced at lunchtime with a program that there would be a program that is in tandem with what I was invited to do just about a week ago when I went to Egypt. But this time it was the tripartite free trade area. But a tripartite free trade area within a geographical setting, economic setting of 3 regional organizations: SADC, COMESA, and the East African Community. And this then brings me to this one, which is the Continental one. And, but the Continental one is just starting to be economic. You see, the infrastructure, railways, roads, the coastal lines, airways, must be in a context, a geographical context which is economic. And it must be a viable economic entity. Otherwise, you're talking of just roads, railways, airways. What feeds them? There has got to be productivity. There's got to be economic activity. Economic activity, various sectors, agriculture, mining, industry, right across. And then countries have something to put on the railways. They have reason to interact. They have the content that is now impelling them to find markets, to find skills, and therefore the impulsion comes from really those entities. The development of agriculture, what stage is it at? Be it at the primary stage, industrial stage, and the industries. Some are agricultural based, others based on minerals, etc., etc. And once you have those in place, then there is meaning given to the railways. There is meaning given to the roadworks. There is meaning given even to the shipments now that go from one port to another. And there is viability, there is mobility of skills also. That's very important. I left out power and energy. Those must be present also. Well, I studied for my economics degree, the Rome Treaty and how the 6 countries, that is Germany, Italy, France, and the Benelux ones, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, when they came together And when they came together, the free trade area was easy. But of course, they had developed over a long period. We are still starters, you see. But all the same, well, it doesn't matter. You start by developing your railways, or it's not developing from zero. We already have something in being, but it's extending them, it's improving the quality. And that's very important. So what we did about a week ago in Sharm el-Sheikh extends now to ECOWAS, extends to Central Africa, to the northern part, the Arab one, which we call the Maghreb area, and it covers all that. And this is what you asked me to launch now.
Yes, the negotiations.
The negotiations for it. And I'm glad, of course, that I'm launching this, and quite logically, because it's extending what we did in Sharm el-Sheikh just a week ago. So, yeah, it's launched. I declare it launched as a free trade area.
Now, one last thing I would ask you, sir, to join us for a group photo. If I could ask all the heads of states and heads of delegations to join my esteemed panel for a very quick photograph, I'll be most grateful. Can I have my gavel back, Your Excellency? Or do you want to keep it? No, and the chairperson, of course, our host of the African Union Commission. Excellency, our host. Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My microphone, thank you. Thank you, Your Excellencies, for that wonderful, iconic shot. But we are moving on to the next level of our program, and for this I will call the Chief of Protocol for the African Union, Mrs. Abala, who's going to come up to explain what happens next. But Your Excellencies, it has been an honor and a pleasure. So, Her Excellency, the Chairperson, will now move on to what is a very momentous. She has within her hands something quite wonderful. What a beautiful an award there. Now, do we have a microphone? Can we get some microphones, please? Another one. One more microphone. And switch them on, please. Okay.
Thank you so very much.
Yes.
So, perhaps you want to say a few words. Perhaps you want to say a few words, Your Excellency.
No, I just want to say thank you very much, ma'am, for recognizing Kenya. And we will continue to work together to push the agenda for women.
Good. Round of applause, please. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Those who have not collected. I don't know whether they're here. Yesterday we gave everybody who was here. They are here. The Kenyans said no, they want theirs collected by their presidents. That's the only reason.
Your Excellency, is that okay?
Then she know.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Are we okay?
Iti tata